And welcome to another episode of This Is Metal. Today, Joe, we're going to be talking all about Ronnie James Dio, but we're going to get real specific. You had a real great idea when I thought that we should do a Dio episode because, the 11th year of his passing just passed this past May, and so I thought let's talk about Ronnie because in episode 4 we talked about Ronnie, but we're talking specifically about the Heaven and Hell album and what a big fan we were of that. So you said, why don't we go back a little earlier in Ronnie's career and kind of talk about, parts of his career people don't know too much about, like the early part. And we're also going to, in this conversation, be talking about the fact that the Rainbow Rising album from Rainbow is also celebrating its 45th anniversary this year. And we'll get a little into that because that's a time in his career that people kind of forget about that I think we should talk a little bit about. So with no further ado, Joe, I guess let's get right into it. Now, I was reading, this is kind of interesting stuff I learned. Ronnie James Dio began his musical career in 1957 in the band The Vegas Kings, where Ronnie was not the lead singer, but the bass player.
Yes, yeah, Ronnie started out playing bass.
Yeah, and
a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, so and so again, I guess he was in this band called the Vegas Kings, and he started out again, as we said, the bass player. In 1958, the band changed its name to Ronnie and the Rumblers, and I guess again at this point, Ronnie's kind of becoming the main guy in the band, the guy that everybody's kind of paying attention to, and of course, his birth name is Ronald. I forget what the last name is, but Ronnie is a much more of a rock and kind of sound than Ronald. Ronald sounds like somebody's grandfather or father, but
sure.
And I think that's part of the reason he changed it. But now, what's funny is when you go back this far, and if you see any pictures of Ronnie from this time in his career, he looks very different. Not like the metal guy. He didn't even have long hair.
He looked like a perfect gentleman.
Yeah, his hair. Yeah, it really did. I mean, like a totally different guy. I mean, his hair was like neck, above his neck. So I think people should go online and check some of those photos. Like very, very interesting to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Another band that a lot of people don't really know much about, or some people may not know at all about, that he was in a band called Elf. Now, Elf was active from 1967 to 1975.
Yes.
And this is where Ronnie started to, I think Ronnie started to come into his own a little bit more. I mean, he wasn't quite the Ronnie James Dio that we all know and love, but he was working his way towards it with this for sure. And this was something that where he finally took a step. It was more of a blues, hard rock kind of stuff that he did, and he was signed to Epic and MGM. So this was his introduction to the real professional big music industry.
Yeah. And getting back to what I was saying, see, if you go all the way back to 1957 when he first started his musical career, it's very interesting because I posted a song, I forget the name of the song, but it was from his band Ronnie and the Prophets. And if you listen to that, it sounds nothing like metal, much more kind of a pop tune. So very interesting. He's, as a singer, he's kind of been all over the place. And so in 1960, the band changed its name to Ronnie and the Redcaps. This is kind of the same band, but it started out as, again, the Vegas Kings, and they changed their name, again, like I said, in 1960 to Ronnie and the Redcaps. Ronnie started to go by the stage name of Ronnie James Dio in 1960. The band once again changed its name now to Ronnie and the Prophets. Okay? In 1967, Ronnie and the Prophets turned into a band that would morph into the Electric Elves, which basically they changed from morph then into Elf, the band you were just talking about. And what's interesting about Elf, like you said, is they stayed together until like 1975. And then if you go on the very first Rainbow album, that is the band that became Richie Blackmore's backing band on the very first Rainbow album when he left Deep Purple. And how this happened was Ronnie James Dio, when he was in Elf, he'd opened several times for Deep Purple, and that's where Richie Blackmore first kind of became aware of who Ronnie was.
Yeah, right. And Elf's self-titled debut album was produced by Deep Purple's Roger Glover and Ian Pace.
Interesting. Yeah. Again,
so all of these connections happened early on, that really established Ronnie's career and what he would go on to do with bands like Black Sabbath and Rainbow and all these other incarnations and stuff. A lot of these earlier grassroots connections are what led to Ronnie turning into who he was and the albums that he put out, and all of those things. All of those things were established, many years before. People just largely know Dio as Ronnie James Dio and
Black Sabbath. And I should
that's
probably
what they associate with. But he had this whole rising and this whole career of work that he established and these connections that he made that allowed him to do what he ended up doing and becoming.
And I should also mention, in regards to the Elf band, Elf also, in addition to Ronnie, featured guitarist David Rock Feinstein, who many people may not know. Him and Ronnie were actually cousins, so they were relatives. And David Rock Feinstein, for anybody who doesn't know, he would go on to form the Rods, which kind of a new underground kind of New York metal band. And they were popular early on, like in the late 70s and 80s. But the thing was, they never kind of reached the success of, say, a Black Sabbath or even a Rainbow, obviously. But David Rock Feinstein, he's always super talented guy, but it's kind of remained under the radar. But the Rods, if you're into metal, I think that's a band you really got to check out too, because they've been around for years. They kind of remain like underground, got a cult status, but they're considered like a legendary New York band at this point.
Yeah. A couple of things I want to run over real quick here with the Elf band.
Yeah.
Some singles were "Hey, Look Me Over," "It Pays to Advertise," "Walking in Different Circles," "She's Not the Same," "Amber Velvet," and "West Virginia." There's some bootleg compilations that you can find. Were "Live at the Beacon" in '71, "Live at the Bank" in '72, and "Live in My Soul Shall Be Lifted" in '73. The Gargantuan Elf album is a compilation of some of the '74 and '75 albums released in '78.
Yeah.
And then it was Ronnie James Dio, the Elf albums in '91, which compiled the '74 and '75 albums that he did with Elf.
And I think part of the reason
there's some still stuff you can dig up and find out there, is what I'm saying.
I think you can find a lot of that stuff, like too, not just on YouTube, but if you go on Amazon, you can actually purchase some of those Elf albums. And the interesting thing I was reading, that was kind of a record. I guess the record company that put that out. They were ones that decided to call it, the Ronnie James Dio years or whatever it was, because of course people are going to want to buy it because Ronnie James Dio, that's like his early band, and it's not a slight, I think, towards any of the other guys in the band, but that's the guy in the band everybody knows,
Yeah, right.
And sometimes that's why record companies do stuff like that, And also, let's talk a little bit about Rainbow now, because Rainbow, of course, was a band that Richie Blackmore formed the first time he left Deep Purple in 1975, and this Rainbow Rising album we came out was released 45 years ago on May 15th, 1976. I can't really believe it's been that long. Now, this is not my favorite Rainbow album. I think I like the first one, Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, which we got to talk a little bit about that too, because what a statement that is. Of course, he calls it Richie Blackmore's Rainbow because of the fact that that's the guitar player from Deep Purple that everybody knew. So everybody knows who Richie Blackmore is. But even going back to the very first Rainbow album, the thing of it is when you hear that voice, very few people knew before Richie Blackmore's Rainbow who Ronnie James Dio was. But with this album, people started to take notice of the guy. And as great of a guitar player as Blackmore was, you could not help but see what a great vocalist Ronnie James Dio was, even back in 1970 '75 when Rainbow came out with that debut album. But I mean, he kind of was him and I guess you could say him and Blackmore kind of a dynamic duo. I mean, Rainbow was much more than just Richie Blackmore, and I don't know how much Richie Blackmore liked that, but that's the thing. People really started to take notice. This band is not just all about Richie Blackmore. Listen to what this singer is doing.
Yeah. I mean, all throughout Rainbow's career, they've had phenomenal singers and great singers. It's no secret, I don't think, that it was difficult, not only for Dio, for just about anybody, to get along with Richie Blackmore.
Yeah.
Very difficult person to work with and get along with. But he managed to put out Rising in 1976 and Long Live Rock and Roll, which is one of my personal favorites, in 1978.
And talking about the second album from '76, Rainbow Rising, which is the one I said is celebrating its 45th anniversary. Okay, just go down the list here. Now, the interesting thing is it's only got 6 tracks. I was looking at the album length. It's only a little over 30 minutes, okay, which is kind of short for album. But the thing is, like they got an 8-minute track on here, Stargazer, and that's kind of like a real kind of showpiece for the band. And so, again, just amazing. It's an amazing album, amazing songs. And the thing is, this is probably Rainbow's most popular lineup. Like you said, they've had everybody from Graham Bonnet, who's from Alcatraz, Joe Lynn Turner, and all these singers are very different. But I think the lineup with Ronnie was probably our most popular lineup. Those are albums that a lot of people kind of go to when they refer to Rainbow. And Ronnie would leave Rainbow in 1979 to go on to form join Black Sabbath as Ozzy Osbourne's replacement. So I mean, when you talk about Rainbow Rising, I mean Ronnie James Dio's, he was really rising at that time.
Yeah. The thing I liked about going back to Long Live Rock and Roll, I mean, it's just such a great record, and Ronnie's voice just shined through. What a powerhouse with tracks like Kill the King, Long Live Rock and Roll, and one of my favorites of all time, Gates of Babylon. I mean, just rich with passion and melody and power. I mean, his voice just was electric. It was alive. It was powerful. It was melodic. What a great, solid rock album that was. Yeah,
and so I was reading that Rainbow Rising was the second album by Rainbow, but bandleader Richie Blackmore only kept frontman Ronnie James Dio for this album.
He fired the whole band.
He fired the rest of the Elf band, and I think part of the reason he thought, in his opinion, maybe that the rest of the guys did not shine as much as him and Ronnie. He knew it would be a mistake to get rid of Ronnie, so it's kind of unique that he saw Ronnie's potential there, but he didn't care about firing any of the other guys. But at that point, when he got rid of the rest of the band, he brought in drummer Cozy Powell, very much of a powerhouse drummer. This guy would go on to play with everybody from Whitesnake to Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I mean, just a powerhouse drummer. Jimmy Bain. Now he was a guy that would go on to later play with Ronnie and Dio. He was the original Dio bass player. He passed away probably about 3 or 4 years ago now. And at that time he was playing with Vinny Appice and Vivian Campbell, the other original Dio guys in Vivian's Last in Line band. And sadly, he passed away when they were playing on a cruise ship. And it was one of the band's first big gigs they were doing. So, Jimmy Bain was playing up until just a few years ago. Sadly, he's no longer here. But he was another great bass player from Rainbow. And they got this guy Tony Carey on keyboard. So you can see at this point by this album, once he fired the original band, they had much more of these kind of powerhouse players that would all go on to have successful careers after they would be out of Rainbow.
Yeah, one more name I want to mention, again on the Long Live Rock and Roll album, our friend Bob Daisley on bass.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
And
Bob
of course,
Daisley played bass with Rainbow as well.
And of course, people know him years later from playing on many of the great Ozzy solo albums, and he was also he wrote a lot of those hits. People, I don't know if people even realize, but you know, him and
he was a lot more than just a bass player.
Him and the drummer Lee Kirksley, they sued Sharon and Ozzy several times trying to get songwriting royalties that they were kind of cheated out of, and I guess eventually they came to some kind of settlement. But yeah, it's Rainbow was one of those bands too, as you're seeing. Great launching pad for many of these guys' careers, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, Rainbow went on to do great things with Graham Bonnet on vocals and Joe Lynn Turner. I mean, outstanding vocalists in their own right that deserve respect and credit, you know. But none of them quite equaling the power and the magic of Ronnie James Dio, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, and I think part of the reason I have a lot of respect for all these guys that have been in and out of Rainbow. I mean, it's been it's one of those bands that's been a great launching pad for several people. I mean, too many to name. But the thing with it is, like I said, started out calling it Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, but by the second album, the record company had dropped that. They just called it Rainbow because it was just such a powerful band. All these players playing together, you know. And I don't know how much Richie Blackmore liked that, but the other thing was with Rainbow is, like you said, the band could have, in my opinion, been much bigger had Ronnie stayed with the band and they had not gone through all these lineup changes. I mean, as great of a singer as Graham Bonnet and Joe Lynn Turner, I mean, you have all these different singers. They're all great in their own right, but it's hard to kind of, when you're changing lead singers that often, it's hard to keep a fan base going, you know?
Yeah. You know, people don't really know all of the dirty laundry and the things that happen on the tour bus and on the road, and you know all the shit that you got to put up with and deal with. And Ronnie had his fair share coming up, and he definitely more than paid his dues in these early days. And that's why another reason I think it's important that we
do this.
We do an episode in respect to that. You know, maybe we should do it with more musicians. You know, they've all went through unbelievable trials and tribulations here, and that was some of the rise to power from our metal god, Mr. Ronnie James Dio. You know, some of the dues that he had to pay, so to speak, was working with people like Richie Blackmore and dealing with people like that. So, and
Ronnie was
important to note that, I think.
And Ronnie was the kind of guy that, have you ever heard him talk? I mean, he everybody I've ever spoken with that's played with Ronnie or knew him or were friends with him, they all tell me, you know, not only is he a great singer, great songwriter, and all that, but they said most importantly he was a great human being. And you hear all these great stories. I mean, Richie Blackmore is probably the one guy that he disliked the most. I mean, whenever you'd hear him talk about Richie, he'd always say, Richie Blackmore, he's an amazing player, super talented guy, but as a human being, you know, he's really got problems. He said, I can tell you stories about how he treated other guys in the band. Yet he was so impressed with Richie's playing that when he was looking for when he was looking for a guitar player for Dio back around 1990, he chose this guy Rowan Robertson, like 18-year-old kid from Europe. He was totally unknown at the time, and he picked him because he wanted a guy that played like Richie Blackmore, had that kind of same European style of playing. So even though he didn't get along all that great or think too much of Richie Blackmore as a person, he could see the huge talent the guy had, you know, and he still, like he said, I'll never play with Richie again. People were always trying to get them back together. He says, you know, it's nothing against Richie, but, you know, me and him just don't get along. I don't think too much of him as a human being. Amazing player, though, you know, and so Ronnie was one of those guys that, you know, he could have, you know, if he had gone back together with Rainbow, he probably had gone on this huge reunion tour. They probably would have made bank. But he was one of those guys, no, I'm not really into it, you know. So that's another thing I always loved about Ronnie is, you know, he was really truthful. He kind of did what he felt, you know, he wouldn't allow somebody to push him into
he didn't pull any punches with the press or, you know, in interviews. I mean, whatever he was feeling at the moment or dealing with, he would just come right out and tell you pretty much.
Yeah, and there's only there's only like really two guys that he really said anything negative about, and I kind of felt he was justified. Like Richie Blackmore, like we've been talking, and then Vivian Campbell, who's the original guitar player in Dio. We won't get too much into it, but at the time, after Vivian was kicked out of Dio or whatever, he'd said some pretty harsh things in the press about Ronnie, and for several years, he went on to say like, oh, I don't relate to that music anymore, and he wouldn't play any of the Dio music for years, and it was only after Ronnie passed away that he started listening to some of those records, Vivian Campbell, and saying, I don't know why I kind of turned my back on that point in my career. He said he started playing some of the old Dio records, and that was the point where he put together, the Last in Line. And he was saying, I kind of feel, maybe he's older, wiser, and he was like saying at the time when he's putting the Last in Line together, maybe I said a few harsh things about Ronnie that I shouldn't have, but that's how I was feeling at the time. So again, I guess you gotta respect the guy for kind of speaking his mind. But Ronnie at the time felt, I give this guy his start in the business, and I feel like he was very ungrateful. But again, people get older and people get wiser. But those are the only two guys that I think Ronnie really ever had a harsh thing to kind of say about it. And I think that says something about a person, because of course when somebody dies, you're going to have all these people come out and say all these great tributes and great things. But even before Ronnie died, you never heard people say a harsh word about the guy.
Yeah, and something else interesting to note, that Ronnie, even though Ronnie didn't get along with him and he didn't make it a secret, he was quoted as saying that Richie Blackmore is the one who gave me my opportunity to show what I could do and what I was worth. That
kind of goes back to what I was just saying about how Ronnie felt about Vivian Campbell not appreciating the fact that Ronnie gave him kind of his start.
Right.
And
he was always he was always appreciative of everything.
Yeah. And
he was, and anybody who met him pretty much says the same thing. That's kind of his MO. That he was always very grateful, very appreciative, very humble, and that's the way to be, man. I mean, the fans are the ones that make you and break you. So
I forget who it was, but somebody was telling me who I interviewed once that a kind of cool story about Ronnie. They were telling me that. This was, say, after everybody left arena, the show is over, everybody's leaving, and everybody gets, the Dio band, they're back on the tour bus, and they're about ready to leave, and Ronnie has the bus driver pull over because he sees this one guy kind of standing all alone in the parking lot, and it's pouring down rain, and Ronnie asks the guy, hey, are you all right? Do you need any help or anything? And, this is just kind of a random fan out in the parking lot. Ronnie's never met him or anything. He didn't even pull the bus driver over. Ronnie said, let's go see what that guy's story is. And the guy said, yeah, he needed a ride somewhere. And Ronnie, even though the band was, on their way somewhere else to the next town or whatever, he told the bus driver, you drop this guy off wherever he needs to go. And, what a cool story. Could you imagine?
Yeah, that is very cool.
And then,
what a cool interaction.
And then, like you're saying, Ronnie, had an appreciation for a guy like Richie Blackmore for giving him his start, but Ronnie, when he got up in his career, he helped other up and coming players. For example, I don't know if you're aware of the Los Angeles band Rough Cut. They were one of those bands early on the LA scene. They never really made a huge splash, but it was a launching pad for guys like Craig Goldie, who would go on to join Dio, and that's where Ronnie and his wife Wendy first met Craig. He was the guitar player in Rough Cut, and
oh wow! And
Wendy managed this band Rough Cut, and also Rough Cut featured. You can look this up later, Joe. But Paul Shortino would be the first guy to replace Kevin Dubrow and Quiet Riot back in 1988, and they did that one album with him. So Rough Cut also launched Paul Shortino's career. And the thing was, Ronnie produced. I interviewed Chris Hager. He's a guitar player. He's played with Stephen Pierce, and he also plays in this band Rough Cut. And they got back together a couple years ago. But anyways, Chris was telling me that not only were they managed by Ronnie's wife Wendy, but Ronnie produced several of the demos, and they said we actually got an opening slot on Dio's first, I think, Holy Diver tour. He said it was. And he said, so, what a cool story we have, just that Ronnie and Wendy were helping us. and that's where again he met Craig Goldie. That would when Vivian was let go from Dio, that was the guy that Ronnie and Dio and Wendy asked to, hey, we want you to be now the guitar player for Dio. And I've heard Craig Goldie tell this story over years that he said also at this time, he said when he was in Rough Cut before he joined Dio, he was like, for a brief time, he was living on the streets of LA, he was homeless, he was living out of his car, and as soon as Ronnie and Wendy found this out, they told him, no, you can't live like that anymore. And I've heard, Ronnie had this huge mansion somewhere in LA, but he told Craig, no, you're going to come live with us until you get until you get back on your feet or whatever. And and they said somebody took Craig Goldie's food or something, and Ronnie snapped him. You know what? You leave this guy alone. He said, you know what? We're gonna get you all the food you need. Don't worry about it. You'll be taken care of. And that's before he's even ever in Dio. Again, that just shows what a great human being Ronnie Dio was.
Absolutely. And their first tour with Rainbow from 75 to 78.
Oh, yeah.
First show at Montreal, November 10th, 1975. They played a show with 3,000 light bulbs, which stretched 40 feet across the stage.
Oh, wow. So
you can imagine what a sight that was, especially back in 1975. They were already getting to be a big deal. A real big deal here. Yeah. And we had, you're talking Jimmy Bain, like you said, on bass, and Cozy Powell came in on drums. And, one thing that Blackmore liked about Cozy Powell was he shared in Blackmore's mutual fondness of practical jokes and pranks and stuff. So
I've heard that, yeah.
They got along pretty good from what I can get, from what I read and what I can gather.
Yeah, in fact, there's this cool DVD out there. It's called like the Richie Blackmore story. It's kind of like a documentary on the life and times of Richie Blackmore. And going back to Deep Purple, him and the singer Ian Gillan, they always kind of had a love-hate thing. And I heard Richie Blackmore. If you watch this Richie Blackmore DVD, it's called the Richie Blackmore story. Richie's talking about Ian Gillan, a singer from Deep Purple. He was trying to play a practical joke on Richie that he thought was just hilarious. That Richie had like some spaghetti he heated up for dinner that was in his room or something, and they were all somehow together. And Ian Gillan thought it'd be funny if I poured ketchup all over his spaghetti, and then I guess Ian Gillan somebody said that Ian did it. Richie said, better tell me who did this, who thinks this is funny. And somebody told him Ian Gillan did, and so when he seen Ian Gillan, he threw the spaghetti in the guy's face. So
wow.
So that's a bit that shows you both sides of Richie Blackmore. The anger, the ego, the frustration, playing a joke. I guess he was playing a joke back. But what a
right.
But Blackmore, he's famous for these things. Like he'd in fact, like in 1990, when he'd leave the band for the final time, this is talking about Deep Purple, going a little ahead. Him and Gillan were like, they got in this huge argument, this huge fight on stage, and Richie Blackmore, he just kind of went wild. He chucked his guitar and he went crazy, and he stormed off the stage and he never went back.
Yeah, that's
and that's
a good way to get a reputation. Maybe not another good one, but
yeah. But talking about Richie Blackmore too, he's doing this thing called Blackmore's Night with his wife, and it's kind of funny because Blackmore's got this reputation, like we're talking about, being difficult to work with and just kind of being one of these guys that really goes off like that. And his wife Candace, who's a singer in his band Blackmore's Night now, she seems like the sweetest thing. But this band that he's doing now, Blackmore's Night, it sounds nothing like Purple. It sounds nothing like Rainbow. It's kind of like folky type music, like real neoclassical stuff. But you'd be totally surprised, but you wouldn't know it was Richie Blackmore. But I'll tell you a story that his publicist sent me a copy of one of their CDs, and I thought the same. I've heard. I don't really think I'm going to like this, but I'll put it on. And I'm not going to tell everybody to go out and get it because I think you have to have a kind of an eclectic taste for it. But it wasn't bad. I kind of said, okay, I can listen to this. It's not totally awful. It's different. But Richie Blackmore's at a point, here in 2021 in his career where he really doesn't give an F, and he doesn't need to, because he's been in the music business for over 50 years. So he's at a point in life where I think it's fair to say he can do what he really wants. You know, he doesn't have the pressure of having to have a #1 album, maybe like back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, it's interesting going back and forth how we're bringing up this topic of working with Blackmore.
Yeah.
You know, and it's funny the different things you read
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
different things. I mean, throughout the years, I've heard stories and I've watched videos of Dio himself saying it, so I know there's a different side of the story.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but you look up Wikipedia or stuff like that, and it says that that Blackmore says that Dio left because he wanted to take the band in a more commercial direction and take the band away from the sword and sorcery theme, and Dio didn't agree with the change and left Rainbow.
Yeah.
And then he went on to make a statement saying if they were good enough, they'd still be in the band. I'm not putting down the other members who were in the band, but no one has ever left Rainbow. It's a fact, not a confrontation, just, well, you didn't quite make it, you'll have to do other things. What an egotistical thing to say.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm
not going to say that about Dio, really? Fuck you.
Well,
You know?
again, I mean, these guys, and I think more in Ronnie's case, I think he had a right to feel the way he did, but Richie Blackmore, that statement kind of says it all, like you said, and it kind of, you can feel in that statement, you can really feel the ego coming out, and I think that's, like I said, that's why that first album was called Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. He wanted fans, he wanted critics, he wanted everybody to know, you know, not just that this was the ex-Deep Purple guitar player's band, but that this is Richie Blackmore's band, because see, Deep Purple was very much Richie Blackmore's band, but he formed it with Ian Pace, the drummer, and John Lord, the original keyboard player, and he got along pretty well with John Lord, but the other guys in the band, he was always kind of arguing with. Even going back to Deep Purple, like, it's kind of funny that Richie Blackmore would leave his own band, but again, he's got such an ego that he didn't really think that leaving Deep Purple was going to maybe ruin his career. He had that ego that I'm going to be able to do my own thing now. I'm going to be able to, carry on. He really didn't care. In fact, it's kind of funny. You mentioned Roger Glover produced Elf, and of course that's the bass player from Deep Purple. And at one point in their career, before Richie decided to leave Deep Purple, he decided, Ian Gillan left the band, and he was kind of glad about that. And then that's when they brought David Coverdale from, before he was ever in Whitesnake. Nobody knew who Coverdale was. He was just this unknown British kid they discovered. And then he wanted to, he wanted to fire Roger Glover, and that's when they brought Glenn Hughes in, and he told them that, hey, okay, well, and the reason he fired Roger Glover, not because Glover had done anything to him, but because Glover and Ian Gillan were friends, and it was actually Ian Gillan that brought Roger Glover into the band. And so once Ian left, Richie Blackmore says, well, since you're his friend, I don't want you in the band anymore. And he told the rest of the guys, he's out of the band or I'm leaving. And at that point, the rest of the band kind of felt like, well, he's a guitar hero in the band. We need him. So unfortunately, Richie's going to get his way.
Yeah, I think that Richie got his way a lot.
Yeah.
With some of those things, I mean, he's an amazing player, and to give credit where credit's due and respect where respect is due. Nobody was doing or had a style like Richie Blackmore.
Yeah.
Not when he came out with it, they didn't.
And I'll tell you this. Joe. I've always been a huge Blackmore fan. I mean, he's a super.
Oh, yeah.
He's a super guitar player.
Amazing songwriter and guitarist, absolutely.
Deep Purple, Rain. I mean, even going back to Deep Purple, I got to say that's probably my favorite band he was in, Deep Purple, because I mean, you just can't argue with all the great hits they have. But talking about the greatness of Blackmore for a minute, I mean, let's talk about the fact that every guitar player, probably the favorite riff, or the riff every guitar player's got to learn is, I'm told, either "Smoke on the Water" by Deep Purple or "Stairway to Heaven" by Led Zeppelin. Now, that's two super great songs to be kind of in the same, categories. But the fact that "Smoke on the Water," that's just such a memorable riff. That's the song every single guitar player ever wants to. It doesn't matter if you're a Deep Purple fan or, maybe if you're a fan of Frank Sinatra, but every guitar player that's on the top of their list that they want to play. So again, that's just talking about the greatness of Blackmore. There's really no denying it.
Right.
And see, Dio, I think part of Richie Blackmore, very much like Ronnie, appreciated the fact that Blackmore gave him his start. Blackmore really couldn't deny what a huge talent Ronnie was. But I think it got to a point where Richie...
he made a comment. Blackmore made a comment at one time. That the first time he heard Dio sing, it gave him shivers down his spine.
In fact, like I was saying, it was during the Deep Purple years that Ronnie and Elf opened several shows for Deep Purple, like you just said there. And when he first saw Ronnie and seeing what he could do on stage, that was kind of what gave Blackmore the idea that I should leave and form a band with this guy. So again, the fact that he's going to leave Deep Purple, his own band, to go do something new because he thinks Ronnie's got that kind of talent, that says volumes about what Richie thought of Ronnie.
Oh, absolutely.
And and what I was getting ready to say, I think not only did he recognize that Ronnie was such a huge talent and had such star ability about everything he did, from his writing, his stage performance, but I think Blackmore started to think about the fact that this guy, this is Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. I can't allow him to get even as big as me or bigger. Could you imagine if like him and Ronnie had stayed together and played together for years, and you're reading reviews about the singer Ronnie James Dio, and nobody's mentioning it. I think Richie has a huge ego, but I think also he had that fear that this guy's getting a little too big, a little too soon. This is still Richie Blackmore's Rainbow.
And Richie kind of had that persona about him.
Yeah.
He wanted the spotlight to be on him.
Yeah, and then and like you said, I heard Ronnie over the years would kind of talk about what you were saying earlier, the fact that Richie Blackmore wanted to take Rainbow in a more kind of a poppy direction. Like if you listen to what they did with Graham Bonnet on that song, Since You've Been Gone, it is a great little pop tune, and I think once they got Graham Bonnet in the band, and Richie seen that he had a hit with that, let's do some more stuff like this to get on the radio. And I think again Ronnie kind of stuck to his what he wanted to do and said, no, Richie, I don't do, and it's funny because like we're saying back in this other band, Ronnie and the Prophets and all the other bands he was in before Elf, Ronnie was kind of doing pop tunes, but see, I think by this point when he's in Rainbow, Ronnie left that behind and he said, no, I like this hard rock stuff, I like this metal stuff, and I think in Rainbow, that is where Ronnie really found his true identity. I mean, even in Elf, Ronnie was kind of, I mean, he was a frontman. He was a guy everybody else, they weren't going to, I mean, we can't name you. We don't know the other guys in the band. We can't name we can name Ronnie James Dio. That's the guy if you're listening to an Elf album, it's because Ronnie James Dio is on the album. But I think by the time he got in Rainbow, he really found his calling. And then that's where, Ronnie's songwriting came to life, as far as all this stuff talking about demons and wizards. I mean, by the time, he would go on to Black Sabbath and form his own band, Dio, you listen to anything like off Heaven and Hell or Mob Rules or, Holy Diver, Ronnie takes you to a different place lyrically. I mean, he's an amazing lyric writer. I mean, he's singing about dungeons and demons and dragons, and believe me, it doesn't even matter if these things aren't real. It takes you like to kind of a fantasy land, a fantasy universe, and it's like, man,
the interesting thing is if people pay attention to the lyrics and really read them, a lot of the times, not all of the time, but a lot of the times that he broached this subject in his lyrical content, he was talking metaphorically.
Oh, yeah.
And a demon can be somebody that's toxic to your relationship, or that's bad, that's trying to, maybe come between you and your wife, or somebody that's trying to split your band up, somebody that's trying to come, cause you to stumble. Well, that kind of is a demon.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody knows this, but Ronnie's wife, Wendy, she would manage his career basically, and I heard her talking in several interviews, like since he's passed on, that actually Wendy met Ronnie like at the Rainbow, which is this famous club here in Los Angeles. Lemmy used to go have dinner and hang out there all the time, but this club I'm talking about, it's called the Rainbow, and it was named after the band Rainbow because, and I think that's where Wendy and Ronnie Dio first met, and
that's awesome.
And so that's how.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so that's how that happened, and I guess she initially the story I heard was that Richie Blackmore wanted to date her, but she was more into Ronnie. And then what a lot of people don't know is Ronnie and Wendy were divorced at the time that he passed, but she managed him all throughout his career, and he stayed close with her even though they were no longer married. Not only was she go on the road and they did all their business together, but I mean, even though they were no longer married, they continued to live like as a family. They were very close, so it's kind of an interesting, unique relationship. But even though like she was his ex-wife, he seemed like he treated her as they were still married and like still family. Kind of a very odd thing, but he stayed loyal. They stayed loyal to one another right up until the very end, and you don't see that too often. I mean, and even though
that's pretty rare actually.
And even though they were no longer married, it seemed like they were the best of friends. And even after he died, she still does these interviews talking about him, and she's the one that continues to release all this Dio stuff. I think there's going to be a new book she has coming out. He was working on it at the time he died, and she's seen that the book is gets finished. And so even all these years later, I mean 11 years after he's passed, when she talks about Ronnie, you feel the love. She's got a fondness, and I just love the fact that even though it's his ex-wife, she still has all that love for the guy.
Yeah, that's, and me too. He's one of my biggest influences.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the words that came out of Richie Blackmore's mouth came out of my heart also. Yeah. The first time I heard Dio sing, I was just in awe. I couldn't put it into words. It was just like, wow. I mean, mesmerized. Wow.
I can't remember if you ever told me, Joe. Did you ever see Dio live?
Yes, I did. Thankfully, I saw him the Masters of Metal tour with Testament, Judas Priest, Motorhead, and Heaven and Hell.
Oh wow!
So when I saw him at the time, I didn't realize this, but he was dying of stomach cancer.
Oh wow!
And that man gave an incredible performance. He blew everybody away. He blew Halford away. He blew Lemmy away. He blew everybody else away. When he came out there, the presence that he commands makes the hair in your fucking neck stand up.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as this little guy walks out on stage and sings into the mic, you're just mesmerized.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny going back to the band Elf, because I don't know. I would have loved to research that, but didn't have the time. But I'd love to know why they called the band Elf. But I almost wonder if it's in reference to Ronnie, because I got to tell you, the time I seen him was on the last Heaven and Hell tour, and they were on a tour, oddly enough, when Jeff Tate was still in Queensryche, and Alice Cooper is a triple threat like tour. They had Alice Cooper, they're all doing headlining sets, Queensryche, and Heaven and Hell. I went to see Heaven and Hell.
That would have been a great tour to see too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Alice. I couldn't pick which one I like best, Alice Cooper or Heaven and Hell, but they were both a great set. But anyways, when you're watching Dio, I mean on stage, like you said, powerhouse voice, but it's a little tiny guy on stage. I mean you see him and from the back of the arena, you're looking at this guy, a little tiny guy, and it's amazing the powerhouse voice this guy has.
Huge, voice of a lion comes out of him.
And when you realize how little the guy is, he's maybe 4 feet, if even that, and I mean that big powerhouse voice just fills the arena. It's amazing when just to see it live. But I mean, his stage presence too. I mean, and again, and I remember seeing Heaven and Hell and thinking, yeah, this is Black Sabbath. But again, at that time, they're kind of forced to call it that. But it's like we know this is Black Sabbath, but okay, what a way to go out. And I say, I'm glad I finally got to see him on that tour, because not only was it his last tour.
I am too. I'm glad that they got to put at least one more record together of great stuff it would have been really cool to see him come out with another one. But
Yeah.
you know, I'm thankful at the same time that at least he got to reunite with Tony Iommi
And Geezer.
and Vinny. That what an incredible band that was.
Now let me.
Man, they were so good. They were so good and so amazing live. It was just the energy was just amazing.
Yeah. Now let me ask you, Joe, because here's another topic that popped up online a couple of months back, maybe about 3 or 4 months ago, where I heard Vinny Appice go online, and he had the idea that he's been talking supposedly to Geezer and Tony about kind of getting that band back together. He said, okay, now I know we can't call it Sabbath, but why don't we get Heaven and Hell back together? And you know how we had, when Ronnie left Black Sabbath during the Dehumanizer tour, and when the other guys wanted to go and open up for Ozzy Osbourne's show in L.A., they got Rob Halford to do again. And Vinny says, why don't we, hey, Geese and Tony, why don't we get back together? We'll call it Heaven and Hell, and let's see if we can do an album with Rob Halford. Now, I don't know about you, Joe, but that's a pretty cool idea. But then you're going to have fans that have mixed emotions. Like, do you call it Heaven and Hell? Because a lot of people think of Heaven and Hell as Ronnie James Dio, but I think it'd be a fun thing for people to see, because we all, even as fans now, we kind of are having that conversation. Could you imagine if Rob Halford had actually ever joined Judas Priest? Black Sabbath. How cool would that have been?
Yeah, I think that would be pretty amazing. But I think it would be even cooler if they gave me a shot at it.
Oh yeah.
I've been told that actually a lot throughout my life. Man, I bet you can sing the fuck out of Dio, and I've been told I can.
So let me ask you, Joe, have you ever tried? As far as and if you were going to try to do like a Dio song, do you think you'd do it from a Dio band, Black Sabbath, or have you ever tried Rainbow?
I would want to do one of each, man. I would want to do like Gates of Babylon from Rainbow. I would want to do some of his solo stuff from Last in Line or Holy Diver. I would want to do some of the stuff he did with Sabbath. I mean, it's all so good. I would just want to do at least one of each.
Yeah, that would be cool. Like as a medley, kind of you could say going to do a Ronnie James Dio tribute here from all eras of his. We're going to do like a medley or whatever. That would be a cool thing. I'll take a couple songs.
Bottom of the line, in all honesty, there will never be
another
Rainbow in the Dark.
Yeah. From
the man on the Silver Mountain.
Yeah, see that's.
He paved his own path probably more than any singer on the planet.
In
my opinion, anyways.
And I'm probably going to get shot in the foot for saying this, but I dare say that Ronnie James Dio was a much better singer than Ozzy Osbourne. I mean, not just technically, but I mean, because what people fail to realize, Ozzy was a great singer for Sabbath as far as the original lineup from when the band first came out, but a lot of people fail to realize that, Geezer Butler was the guy that wrote all those early Black Sabbath songs, and from what I understand, when they renewed their publishing deal, that they agreed to kind of split the songwriting royalty with everybody. But it was really Geezer that wrote the lyrics, and even in Ozzy's solo career, like we talked, I heard Ozzy at one point saying, it was actually Randy Rhoads that kind of taught Ozzy really how to, for the first time in his life, write a real song, But
right.
Even like Ozzy would get we talking about Bob Daisy and Zakk Wylde and all these other guys that were, even Randy Castillo, the drummer, that were great songwriters, Jakey Lee, and of course it's Ozzy's band, so he's going to get songwriting credit, but what a lot of people fail to realize that Geezer's saying that's why he was glad when Ronnie joined Sabbath, because he says all of a sudden I could just play the bass. I didn't have to be responsible for writing all the lyrics because Ronnie was just such a great writer, so there's really no need for me to do it anymore.
Right. I can't imagine somebody trying to tell Dio what you. This is what we need you to sing, dude. Really? Dio.
Yeah, and I think
get out of his way.
Yeah, and I think if they tried, that he might put them in their place. But Ronnie was that type of guy, and again, even though he'd been out of Sabbath several times, I think he, for example, had much more of a love for both Geezer and Tony than maybe he did for Richie Blackmore. But I think he had an appreciation very much for, like he did with Richie, about, hey, thanks to, I appreciate that these guys kind of gave me a second chance. When I left Rainbow, who knows where I would have gone otherwise. And he also had appreciation for these guys, what huge talents they were in their own right. And I think it was cool to see that when Ronnie finally went back and they called it Heaven and Hell, but it was really Black Sabbath, that not only was that kind of where he ended his career, that was the final thing he did, but he ended his career playing with the two guys probably that were most like his brothers, that he was the closest to. And I think it's cool that Sabbath got to kind of end that way on a positive note, as far as the Ronnie era, because I think no matter what they'd been through, he'd always had huge respect for both Geezer and Tony.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In fact,
and something else worth mentioning maybe is the fact that Wendy Dio also managed the career of Tim Owens for a while. I don't know if that's still the case.
I think it is.
For a while, she was managing, I believe, Beyond Fear, his band that he had.
Yeah, and so much. I know that's very true because after Ronnie had passed, this is predating Vivian Campbell's band Last in Line. They had this thing called the Dio Disciples, which was basically the final Dio band. All the other guys that played in Dio with Ronnie, and they were some of the other guys that had played in Dio over the years. They would do these live dates, and then as far as the vocalists, they had Tim Owens and Oni Logan, who was also managed by, of course, Oni Logan was the original singer from Lynch Mob we talked about, and
right.
And so these were the two guys they brought to do the vocals in the Dio Disciples, and the vocals would be split among Tim and Oni, and both these guys are powerhouse vocals, and they were both very good friends with Ronnie, obviously, because Ronnie helped them in their career. So did Wendy, and I went to see one of these Dio Disciple shows at Disneyland, of all places. They had a House of Blues there, and I tell you, it was it was like nothing I'd ever seen. Yeah, I'm seeing Tim Owens, I'm seeing Scott Warren, the keyboard player from Heaven and Hell. I'm seeing Tim Owens, Oni Logan, and all these other guys that were in Dio over the years. And Craig Goldie was there, the guitar player. And of course, these guys are, they make a living by doing live shows and stuff. Of course, so of course they're getting paid. But what I'm saying is, these guys were there that night playing the music simply for the love of Ronnie, if you know what I mean. And it was almost like Electric Church Show. The audience and the band on stage kind of became one. And even though Ronnie James Dio was not up on stage, it was being done in his memory. Everybody was loving it. But I tell you, I felt like Ronnie was in the room, like, kind of cheering everybody on. But that was like an experience I'd never seen before. And what I loved about it was the actual guys that played in the band with him.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so that's pretty much all I got to say. But again, like you're saying, they're going to be guys that definitely come after Ronnie James Dio. I don't think anybody will ever be that big or have that same kind of talent.
Nobody will be able to recreate that kind of energy and atmosphere.
Oh, and before Joe, before we wrap this up, here's an interesting question. I think I don't know if you and I have discussed this, but what are your thoughts on they were doing this before the pandemic and everything. I think they're going to start it up again too. Again, the Dio Disciples, supposedly they're also going to be recording an album, or they've been working on one for the last several years, supposed to be coming out in the next year or so. They've been doing these live shows, but what do you think about, did you ever hear anything about the Dio Returns Tour, which is these guys, that were in the Dio band, as we're saying, they go out, they do a live show, and then they have a Ronnie James Dio hologram. Now, first of all, is that something you think you'd want to see, or how do you? What's your reaction to that?
Personally, I wouldn't pay to see that. I wouldn't want to see that, and I don't think that they should do that. Yeah. I understand that they're maybe coming from a good place, and that they mean well, but to me, you know what? Let's honor the man. Let's respect the man. Let's listen to his music. Let's celebrate the man. Absolutely. But running out with these holograms, to me, that's just hokey. If anybody ever tries to do that after I'm dead, you better go after them.
Yeah. I hear you. But it's an interesting concept, because I kind of hear what you're saying. On one hand, I mean, you go and it's not Ronnie James Dio, and they're probably going to charge you a hefty price just to kind of See,
yeah, it's turning into a cash cow, is what it is.
I would love it for the simple fact, I would kind of be interested, like, I wonder what it would be like. But I don't really know that I would want to go, because then, I mean, you know it's not Ronnie James Dio. It's kind of it's a novelty thing, if anything. I'd be kind of interested to see what it would be like, but I don't know that I'd want to pay my hard-earned money to see, because I know I think I'd rather go see, like, you know, Tim Owens up there or Oni Logan, because, again, these are guys that knew Ronnie. He helped them get their start.
Celebrating Ronnie, doing it their own way, but
I also think
how Ronnie sang,
I also
of
think
course,
it would be,
you know, but
I also,
not trying to copy Ronnie, but
and see,
celebrating Ronnie.
Yeah, and see too.
And that makes sense. To me, that makes perfect sense.
And see too, the vocals are pre-recorded in that, and so you're going to have this hologram of Ronnie, who you know it's not real. And so I wonder how hard that is to match up, you know, the image with the vocals, you know, because it's not a live person. So you always got, and then with that, you always got the chance that something is going to go technically horribly wrong, you know. Let's say Milli Vanilli, if you know what I mean, when you're up there trying to do this. and then
I don't think they should do that, and I hope they don't.
Yeah, they've actually done.
That's an attempt to grab money. That's what that is.
Yeah, and
it's sad.
And I guess the final thing is to come out of Ronnie's passing that is kind of cool is they got now the Ronnie James Dio Stand Up and Shout Cancer Foundation, and they raise all this money in the name kind of to help these people fight cancer in the name of Ronnie James Dio, and that's very important because Ronnie was getting up there in age, but I mean I think he was 60 something when he died, maybe a little older, but somebody was saying that he was a workaholic. He was always on the road. He was always making albums, and and
he loved it. He lived it and loved every minute of it.
He died with his rock and roll shoes on. But somebody was saying, another thing about Ronnie was that they're trying to educate people on with this cancer foundation, in addition to raising the money, is that
that's fantastic.
Is that Ronnie never went to the doctor because he was just always working, never had time, never made time, and the only reason he went to the doctor, he was feeling really ill, and it got to the point where he was afraid something was wrong, and sure enough, they found the cancer, but at that point it had spread all throughout his body, and somebody was saying, in fact, at his funeral, I think his doctor that was treating him had made a statement to the press that if Ronnie maybe gone to the doctor a little more often and they had been able to spot it, there was a chance that they could have got it, but who knows?
Yeah, that's sad.
Yeah.
You gotta go, start feeling sick, you gotta go to the doctor, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, and getting back to Rainbow, Richie Blackmore, before we wrap this up, like I think it's interesting, Joe, because I gotta tell people, again, when you and I talk about, picking topics for the episodes we do, like initially, like I said, I brought up the idea, hey, hey Joe, do you realize, 11 years has passed since Ronnie James Dio, died. Let's do an episode on Ronnie James Dio. And you were kind of telling me, which I kind of agree with. You said, okay, well, we'd already done a Dio episode, which we did, when we launched the show last year. It was episode 4, I believe. Great show, but we kind of talking mostly about Sabbath, and you're telling me, you know what, if we're going to do another Dio-related show, that's cool, but let's kind of change it up a little. Let's talk about the early part of his career. And you and I never really thought about that because, like you and I, we first discovered him in Sabbath, and of course, so we're Sabbath fans and Dio fans. And I do like Rainbow, but it kind of often gets forgotten about. And
yeah, right.
And I'm also a huge Richie Blackmore fan, so I thought, hey, that would be cool to kind of put this all together. And like I said, I urge people. I urge people to go online and like type in like Ronnie James Dio and the Prophets, because some of the songs are almost, they're pop tunes. Let's be honest, Joe. And and your ears will be amazed because it's nothing like the metal god he went on to become. But it's also interesting because you kind of listen with your ears and you think, this is the beginning of this guy's career, and then by the time he dies all these years later, fronting Sabbath, this is what he became, and the legend, what he would go on to become, was even bigger. And it's kind of a cool story because he started out as this, and he totally changed his identity. And
went from Ronnie and the Prophets to Heaven and Hell.
And grew his hair long, and And a lot of people don't know that, like I said, he was a bass player. When he first started his career, he's playing the bass, not the lead singer. He kind of morphed into that. And it's interesting because I always heard Ronnie talking about, like, when they'd be in the studio, even though he had a bass player, a lot of times when he'd record demos or he'd get together with the band, he'd come up with a song like on the bass, just riffing. And I think a lot of people don't even know that. And I heard Ronnie also played the piano. You know, he produced all his like solo albums and stuff, and so he had a great ear for music. But just super talented guy, and so I'm glad we did this. And before we wrap this up, Joe, I keep saying that, but I thought you might want to tell folks what's going on with your band, the Scream Kings.
Well, we're going to be doing a story on This Is Metal for next week on the new Scream King release. And June 25th is our official release date for our third album, The Indomitable Spirit. And right now we released Reign of Hellfire, the first single and video. It's on Facebook and on our website and all of that.
Now, great video, Joe.
If you get a chance, go check that out.
Great video, Joe. I must say, looking so much like a metal guy in that video. Talk a little bit about the video shoot, the getting dressed up, because again, I love how you're dressed in it. You just look like such a metal guy.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's just who I am and what we do, and we got a group of guys that are, kind of all saying a bunch of peas in the pod,
Yeah, and we'll
a bunch of old school metalheads, and it's working out great.
And we'll kind of get more into this.
Doing more.
Yeah, next week, like you said. But before we do, I just got to tell people, go and check out the video, because just by looking, Joe, it's a real professionally shot video. I mean, I don't know what all it took to make that video, but looking at it, I swear it's like something that you might have seen on Headbangers Ball back in the day. It's that good of quality. And so, again, we can talk more about that next week. So thanks for doing this, my friend. And
likewise. Appreciate it.
And then after that, people, just to let you know, Joe and I are going to do an episode on Bruce Dickinson's solo career, because that's another thing that kind of gets overlooked. So I thought we'll have some fun with that. Take care, Joe. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.